This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 468, Drupal AI. On today's show, we're talking about artificial intelligence, AI, how to integrate it with Drupal, and what the future might look like with guest Jamie Abrams. We'll also cover AI SEO Analyzer as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Jamie Abrams. Jamie founded a Drupal agency that focused on native Drupal CRM and business applications. And then he got obsessed with AI and is now a co-maintainer of the Drupal AI module, as well as one of the AI track leads for Drupal CMS. Jamie, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-hosts are filling in for Nate because he is down in the land of Mickey. Martin Anderson Klutz, Senior Solutions Engineer at Acquia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And last, certainly not least, Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
I'm happy to be here. Very excited to talk about the AI module and AI and Drupal CMS in general. But I've been using that module now for a few months, so happy to talk about it.
I actually have an off-topic question for you, Nick. Any AI Lego like crossover?
Unfortunately, yes. This is one of those places where AI has had a negative impact.
Interesting. Tell me more.
One of the really big parts of the Lego community is what they call mocks, my own creations. So people making their own creations. And AI and they take a lot of effort, a lot more effort than people think. But now that people have access to AI, you can't go anywhere without seeing just generated AI Lego models. And while some of them are interesting and can be used as inspiration, a lot of them they very, very, very quickly became repetitive. A
Yeah.
lot of them, use pieces that don't exist. So like even if you find something that you like as inspiration, you can't like rebuild it. So it's become one of those things where it was very, very interesting in the beginning and then very quickly flooded every single forum that has anything to do with Lego, and they all abandoned AI.
Somebody should build an AI that can take kind of those mocks and then reverse engineer them into a set of directions that you can then use to build them, because that would be really cool.
A lot of people do sell them. Like there's a website called Rebrickable where its main purpose is people selling their own instructions for sets. So you
Interesting.
can, if you find something on there that you like, you can purchase the directions. Now, you have to do your due diligence, read the reviews. Some people are better at writing directions than others. So
Sure.
they're not going to be the quality of Lego themselves either. But yeah, if you're interested in that, that's a good place. But yeah, AI generated models are they're a hot topic in the community.
Interesting. Well, let's shift our focus from Lego bricks to the Lego bricks of Drupal, if you will, and turn it over to Martin to talk about our module of the week. What do you have for us this week, Martin?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted an AI-based tool to give your Drupal site's editors feedback on the SEO readiness of their content? There's a module for that. It's called AI SEO Analyzer, and it was created in August 2024, so less than a month ago, by Juhani Vataya, who goes by JV on Drupal.org. It has a 1.0.0 beta 1 version available, which supports Drupal 10.3 and 11. And we presumably is actively maintained, being so new, has no open issues, and is officially in use by 2 sites according to Drupal.org. Now, once you enable this module along with the AI module, you can select the default provider and optionally modify the default prompt that will be used to generate the report. With that done, editors or anyone with the new View SEO Reports permission will see an Analyze SEO tab on nodes throughout the site. Generated reports are stored in the database for ongoing reference, and the reports are also revision specific. So you could run reports on both a publish node and a draft revision. There's a separate create SEO reports permission needed to generate reports. And within the form, an editor can modify the default prompt, for example, to get suggestions on optimizing for a specific topic or to add or remove areas from the generated report. By default, the report will include areas like topic authority and depth, detailed content analysis, and even technical considerations like mobile responsiveness and accessibility. It's able to do the latter by generating the full HTML markup of the node and then passing that to the AI provider for analysis. Now, it feels to me like it was just yesterday that the AI module had its first release, so I think it's great to see that there are already community-created editions like this one, evolving as part of the Drupal AI ecosystem. So let's talk about AI SEO Analyzer.
So I have a question. I don't think you mentioned it because I'm reading through the notes here, but you enable the AI module and then you select the default provider. So have they created their own AI to be able to analyze this, or is it using one of the like already existing ones?
So this basically acts as something that builds on the AI module that Jamie's here to talk to us about.
Hmm.
And so it would use one of the providers that is supported by that module. So right now, I think there's 7 different ones that are supported out of the box, but you could, of course, create a custom module to integrate with some other kind of an LLM if you need to.
Okay. Dumb question. Are there like literally like SEO specific AIs out there? Like that or are you just saying like, hey, you can integrate it with Chat GPT and it'll tell you if your page stinks or not?
I have to imagine it was probably tested with ChatGPT
Got it.
quite a bit, but I couldn't say. It wouldn't surprise me if people have sort of, marketing or even SEO specific LLMs that they've trained. So,
Hmm.
to be able to leverage something like that, I'm sure would yield better results.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there weren't already 500,000 SEO related AI bots and services out there. But yeah, that's one of the nice things about the AI module is that you can set up the different providers separately, and then you can just integrate them with one of these helper modules. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's cool to see, like you said, it's cool to see the ecosystem already starting to build up with specialized use cases. Yeah, it's awesome.
Martin, another on topic module of the week, of course. Where can folks ask questions, suggest modules of the week, and so on?
We are always happy to get nominations for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as Man Clue on all of the Drupal and social platforms.
Wonderful. All righty. Let's move on to our primary topic. So, Jamie, we're going to talk about Drupal AI, but before we do that, for anybody that may or may not have been living under a rock for the last couple of months slash years, can you just explain what AI is for the listeners?
I suppose, yeah, like AI, this new version of AI, this thing called an LLM, is this tool that you can give it stuff in natural language, and it's trained to give you an answer that will make you happy, basically. It's just trying to give you an answer that will make you happy. And it turns out that the human language has so much richness in it that doing that simple thing of you ask it a question, it makes you happy, means that you now have something that can do a whole bunch of stuff that we take for granted. It's this tool that can write poetry, that can make decisions for you, that can give you information. But really, what's going behind the scenes is it's just looking at everything everyone has ever said, and it's trying to guess if you say that thing, what do I, how would you how should I respond that you'll be happy with this answer? Um, so yeah, that would be my way of looking at it.
Yeah, I would only add to that because I've been watching a lot of stuff about this. I would only add to that that most of the things that people are calling AI nowadays aren't truly artificial intelligence. They're a specific subset of a piece of what a true AI would be. And right now, that powerful piece is LLMs, like the large language models, are the pieces that are like doing what Jamie just said. You know, a true AI though is going to be able to think and solve problems and come up with novel things and do a lot more.
It it's not programmed to do that, right? Like it's extrapolating from its knowledge base basically a little bit, right? That's the idea of kind of like true AI, as opposed to like some people call AI just a very well programmed like chatbot or something like that, right? Is that what you're meaning, Nick?
Y- Yeah, I mean, it's more that like an LLM is a part of what a true AI would be,
Right.
but because it's the newest piece that has been developed, or actually, it's not even new. LLMs have been around forever, but ChatGPT has certainly been a breakthrough in ease of use, right, and speed and quality. I mean, we'll probably talk about quality a little bit more, but like that quality is so much higher than what they did way back when, that it's novel, and it's really the first time I think that LMs have been brought to the public, right? Where anybody anybody that's even remotely tech savvy can interact with an AI at this point and prompt it and get something that they think is valuable back.
Even
But
me.
I was
but
listening to an AI researcher recently who made the comment that effectively, anything that technology couldn't do 2 or 3 years ago, we tend to label as AI. So, the notion of what we classify as artificial intelligence, I think, continues to evolve as well over time.
Yeah. And that was my only point, right? Like we're thinking of this AI now, like you said, Martin, because it's new, but when they start integrating these LLMs into other systems, that will become the new AI. But LLMs will always be around, and they'll probably always be part of whatever AI becomes, because one of e- aside from like what the output is, one of the things that they excel at is understanding your question, right? And I mean, I would say that's probably one of the strongest things. Like you can put malformed, not great questions in, and it will understand what you're asking, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose I have a slightly spicy take on it because um, one of the things that I find is I was not really into AI before LLMs came around. I tend to look down on machine learning a little bit. To me, those are just fancy lines of regression that you can do in Excel. Um, there were some situations where machine learning was doing some pretty good stuff. Like the Netflix recommender was pretty good, but I don't think it's fundamentally changed everything for me. Like, it's not perfectly right at all. I don't even know if it regularly gets things right anymore. So I tended to take a very skeptical view of AI until LLMs came around. So I've become like a super pro LLM person. And there's a lot of people I know who are like more data science people, computer science backgrounds, talk about AI, and they'll tend to look down on LLMs because the way that LLMs work, they tend to get things wrong a lot, very unpredictable, very big. I just go back to the fact that, Google invented this stuff and they did nothing with it. Before ChatGPT released their thing, almost everyone in the AI community didn't think this stuff was going to go anywhere. Like nobody predicted the impact this would have. So I'm
Yep.
like a bit suspicious of anyone who calls themselves an AI expert. So a lot of people will be suspicious of AI experts now because they're like, "Oh, you just know about LLMs. You've only been doing it for a year and a half." But I'm kind of like, "Well, you've been doing it for decades. You didn't predict this." So I feel like there's something special about LLMs. Oh, yeah, there's something special. I'm very into them. Though. Yeah, spend a lot of
Yeah.
time with ChatGPT at the moment.
I feel like I don't know. I feel like I want to see it get to the point where it's like Jarvis from Iron Man, right? Where like you're just like having a conversation with a computer, and it's doing useful stuff for you, and it's like you know eh, every time I talk to a virtual assistant, whether it be the Amazon one or the Apple one, and I'm specifically not saying their names because they're right here listening to me. I'm always slightly dissatisfied with like unless I phrase my request very specifically. I'm always a little dissatisfied with the responses when I go kind of like off the script, right? And to your point, Nick, like being able to understand the request and then provide something is like it feels like a little bit of a game changer. And then using that, large language model to be like to be useful and have context, like I'm waiting for it to get to that level where you
Yeah.
can have like that assistant that is actually useful and you can interact with.
Yeah, it's about mapping it. I mean, behind the scenes, those are called intents. It's about mapping it to an intents, right? And we always thought that there'd be some sort of voice interface. Like if you look at Star Trek, Picard would always say what Earl, tea Earl Grey hot. And it's funny because that back then it seemed like, oh my God, he can order this. But like nowadays, you're like, why can't he just be like, I want a hot tea or give me tea? And it knows that he always gets Earl Grey and he always wants it hot. Like the
Yeah.
fact that he had to structure in that very, very specific way to get what he wanted, now even nowadays, like LLMs are so good at understanding intent that you can set prompts, you can set like memory. You can be like, hey, when I want tea, I want Earl Grey. If I want something else, I'll tell you. If I ask for tea, I always want it hot unless I tell you iced, right? Or vice versa. And
Or
you
I
can
mean,
art
like even for it to say, "Oh, you want the usual?" "Yes, I do." "Okay, fine, great. Thanks for asking." Right? Like that interaction feels, I don't know, feels better to me.
yeah.
Mm.
But anyway, Martin, get us back into Drupal.
So yeah, taking things back to Drupal, Jamie, why don't you tell us about the AI project for Drupal and how it's different from the AI modules Drupal sites were using previously?
Cool. So, yeah, my journey with this started in, I think it was Drupal Dev Days Vienna, and just before that, ChatGPT really took off. So I was actually a stay-at-home dad for a bit, and although I founded the company, I took a little bit of a step back, and then this AI stuff just was crazy. I just went totally insane for it, and I was just having dreams about AI. So we started building things. Um, but back then, we were trying to build things that could prove that it could do something useful because it was doing things that were fun and cool, but could it do something that would actually like fundamentally change the way that you work in some way? And so we built our search API AI. Um, we built I made this little views GPT module that would like create views. It would write the YAML files for you by natural language, and it was all not quite there. It showed it would. What I found with early AI is that it would show you amazing demos, and then when you tried to use it in real life, it was always like just that slightly not there enough that it was just annoying, and you would just give up on using it. So we started building these things for a while, um, and I would try and work with others in the Drupal community, but we were kind of doing our own thing because again, everyone was experimenting with things. And I met Marcus, who worked on the AI interpolator, and Nick, and you know that pretty well.
Yep.
And that was the first time I met somebody else who I felt like had similar levels of obsession. Like, so, he's got so many videos of things you can do with AI and interpolator, and I felt also that he really got it. Like, whereas most people would focus on things like the abstraction layer, which what I'll get into, and it is important, but they focus on the tech. He showed you all of these use cases of things you could just magically do with this AI stuff, like downloading a video, transcribing it, summarizing it, and putting up a LinkedIn post in 20 minutes, or migrating stuff. It was just like you could suddenly do everything, and you could do it with natural language in an easy to way to understand. So it just I felt like he got the goal with AI is to like do useful things for people and not focus on the tech. So we hired him and we started working together on loads of demos and building things for people. And it just started happening where we were getting onto a tipping point where we're building things that were actually cool, actually useful. So we did some stuff for the train industry as well, which I'll be talking about at Barcelona. And everyone else was at the same time. There was an abstraction layer starting to exist that would allow you to use any module, and it was looking pretty good. Search was starting to get better. Stuff with OpenAI was getting better. Before, like open source models were just terrible, but actually around that time when we released the AI module, Llama was getting pretty good. Gemma was getting pretty good. Claude was just better than OpenAI for a lot of things. So it just came together. the AI namespace was around and Kevin found it. And Kevin, he's worked on the OpenAI module, so he reached out to us, like, do you want to start working together on this rather than doing our own thing?
It's
Um,
Kevin Quillen, by the way.
yeah, Kevin Quillen. And yeah, and then so we reached out to the person who made the abstraction layer, which was Michael, SEO Go. And he's really focused on the AI search stuff. We reached out to Scott, who'd been working with Kevin and us to a degree. And he just felt this was the time. And so we built this abstraction layer. But what that meant was, is that this old problem that we had of trying to figure out which model you want and trying to evaluate them, um, it would just go, because if you built on top of this, we could build everything we wanted and just swap out. And when a new model pops out, a new company pops out, you just try out, see if it's better. Um, and I think, yeah, the rest is history, because once we had that, it didn't take long to improve what Michael had done. Um, it just became something of like, why would you ever use anything else as a baseline? Why would you ever just make something just for Claude? Because that's
Yeah.
scary. Yeah,
I have to say too that it's aside from that, the I think the AI module screams for like an ecosystem in Drupal, right? There's several
mm,
ecosystem modules in Drupal: ECA, rules, commerce, web form to an extent. AI really wanted that, and I think you guys have been putting that in place. But I just want to make a quick comment too that I was looking at your issue queue the other day, and I've never seen such a wall of green on an issue queue. You guys have so many issues open, but it's because that are marked as fixed. It just hasn't been 2 weeks yet. So you guys have hundreds of issues, but almost all of them are fixed because you guys are moving so fast. And a lot of them are planning, a lot of them are some of them are bug fixes, but you guys are one of the things I want to call out, there's incredible momentum behind there.
yeah,
And Marcus, I think, is doing a lot of the work, but like you said, you have so many other people just putting in hours and hours and hours to make sure that this kind of covers that base, that ecosystem level. I'm very, very impressed. It's you know the switch over from AI interpolator to this was pretty clean too. It's been fascinating to keep tabs on and see how that's been built out.
yeah. I mean, Marcus is. I mean, particularly he is. He just moves so fast. It's been amazing working alongside him on these things.
Yeah,
Having visions of something and having it just all suddenly built has been really cool. So yeah, I think that's been really exciting. I think me being able to meet Marcus and start working together on it, because he was really into AI for similar amounts of time, but worked for companies that were either nervous about open source or into open source but nervous about AI. And so, because I'm a founder of the company, I can choose where it goes, and this is an obsession for me. um, I really fought to bring Marcus on and be like, look, we both think that this AI stuff is going to just take over the world. It's going to be super important. Why do we want to waste any of our time doing like a 50-50 split, building standard Drupal sites, and then having like a day or two to work on an AI module? So we were like, no, we just need to try and make it. Everything that we do is just pushing AI forwards. Um, and we've
yeah,
been able to do that for the last few months. And it's been really, really cool to see what's happened when you are able to just force it.
I
Um,
really
yeah,
yeah,
I really gravitate towards your point of view though, is like AI is out there. There are a number of different AI, utilities and things, right? But the fact that you want to make it, accessible and easy is amazing, because I think that's something that as technologists we often don't think about, and maybe it's more maybe I should say as as developers maybe we don't think about it as much, is like when we get to the end product and and somebody needs to actually use it, is it effective, is it easy to use, or is it something where they have to they have to do a certain set of steps in a certain order to make it useful. And I think looking at it from more of a how people are going to use it and making that as easy as possible is super interesting, at least to me.
yeah. Thanks. I mean, I do think that's super important because one thing I noticed is, as I said, I was a stay-at-home dad. I was in these, toddler groups all the time, play groups, and I've been interested in VR before, and I'll talk to people a bit, and they glaze over, or I never got into crypto, but I got into I think VR was a big thing. And I just remember when AI took off, I could just chat to anyone or show them something, and they would come up with all these ideas of things they could do. Like you've got a toddler who only wants blue food. How can you make some like macaroni cheese that's got the color blue in it? Like, it was just so interesting of all these things that you could do. And what I have found is if I spoke to a data scientist, someone with a physics or engineering background, a lot of them would be very skeptical of AI. They would talk about how it gets things wrong all the time. It's not good at maths. But I spoke to someone with like a language background, an art background, management or psychology, and they would just be telling me all the cool things they're doing. And one of the things I feel like a lot of, I would say technologists, but it's not really technologists, it's specifically coders take for granted, is there's a lot of things if you're a programmer, which I'm not. So I think that's another reason why I'm sort of fighting. Like in Tron, I fight for the user, right? Like I feel like there's an element where there's things that programmers find so easy to do, they take for granted that actually this thing is quite a useful thing to be able to just transform Excel spreadsheets easily, or be able to scrape important information off a website. But with AI, someone who doesn't have the time to learn this or the mindset, suddenly there's a whole bunch of things that are actually easy for a developer to do that they can just do themselves. And a lot of
Yeah.
them would tell me, these people I'd speak to who would be like high up in government or companies from a project management idea, they would have these ideas of how to improve their organization that needed tech, and they would come up with it and they would design it and they would give it to the tech team, and it would go forever and they would have no influence over it. They'd never see it again. It's just not theirs. And it's something I find very empowering about AI that allows you as a non-developer, so and maybe some not as many people in this audience, but be able to suddenly do things that people in this audience have been used to. So I think that's always been my focus. That's why I liked working with Marcus, because his interpolator has always been focused on how can I make it so as many people as possible can do this thing easily. And that's exciting to me. Yeah.
So let's I think that's fascinating, but let's get down to actual use cases then. So you said you have been using this in the real world, and I have a couple examples too of some demos and things we've built. But how are you using the AI module in Drupal now?
So there's two really big use cases, I suppose. The term RAG, which we'll probably want to explain, but using AI to search for things. Well, I say three. There's the search. There is taking unstructured data and turning it into something that's structured, which is really important. It sounds very boring to say, but I think actually in the real world of work, so much is unstructured data and a human turning it into some structure so that it can then go through some kind of automated system.
Yep.
Um, and AI is so good at that, that there's like loads of things that are like low hanging fruit of ginormous things that you could build with AI that would save loads of money just very easily and quickly. And so one of the things we worked on was in the train industry. So we built a delay repay system. So if your train's delayed, you can upload your ticket, and our system will calculate how delayed the train was, how much money you're going to get back, customer service, fraud prevention, accounting, gives you your money back, etc. Um, but the first step of is this ticket, a photo of a ticket valid for this journey, did require a human. You'd build this form that was just loads of tickets, and someone would just go click yes, 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 and yes. Um, and that was really important because sometimes like things would go wrong, and it would sometimes takes months for people to get their money back because the backlog would get huge. But with AI, I tried it out really early on with ChatGPT, where I did an early one of just using OCR and AI to just and compare it to the data we have, and like, is this right? And then we built what we called an evaluation, where we tested it across a whole bunch of previously human checked submissions, and we found we could get to like 90% automation rates with about 90% accuracy. And we want it more, and I think we'll be able to get it a lot more, especially with the newer models. There's like early signs. I think we're going to get close to 100, but actually humans aren't 100%. So we don't
Yep.
need to get it to 100. We need to get it to more like 95, 96, 97. And that was really cool how quick we could make something that worked. The hard part was then proving it, the legal stuff, the selling it, the
Yep.
getting through organizations. That was the hard part, but the getting AI to solve it was really fast. So that was a big use case. And I can talk about agents in a bit if you want as well as a use case.
Yeah, we've been using it for the second case that you mentioned, taking unstructured data and moving it to structured, right?
Yeah,
The two things that we've been doing is taking documents that people upload, whether it's a PDF or a Word document or something, then sending it. I don't know if this is actually AI or not, but it's part of the AI suite. We send it to the unstructured API, get Markdown back, and then send that to ChatGPT and ask questions, very specific questions about what's in the content, so that we can then parse that into Drupal entities. And we found that it's pretty accurate,
yeah,
not 100%. I've found in most of my testing that if you ask ChatGPT is the main one people are using, so obviously there's other AI systems, but if you ask ChatGPT a question, yes, it hallucinates a lot. In my experience, if you ask ChatGPT about a particular specific set of information in a prompt, it's more likely to miss something than make something up,
yeah,
right? So if you say, "Here's this paragraph, you know, what is it about?" It's gonna be pretty good. Or like, who's been mentioned in this paragraph? It's not gonna I haven't found an instance where it just makes up some random person that isn't mentioned in the thing. Now it might make a mistake. It might think somebody's, first name and last name are two separate names, something like that. Might think that there's two people because of that, but it's not gonna just completely make something up. Don't take that as gold. It's certainly I don't you know, I'm not 100% of an expert on this piece, but in my experience, I found when you're passing information in and asking about that information, it's accurate.
yeah. And I think like one of the things I like to do is think about it like how humans think about the problem, because it's the same thing for us. Like if I give you a piece of text, what's the probability that you're just going to make up something read the book and make up something random about it? It's kind of low. You might do that if you really don't want to read it at all. Most of the time, you're
100%.
yeah. So like you could solve it by, again, how do humans solve this? Well, what you could do is um, go through your text, categorize everything you want to pull out of it, put in some kind of taxonomy, and then have a second pass. So have another AI agent like look at that piece of text, look at what's there, and go, have we missed anything? And then have a third pass, and you just keep going until regularly it says, nope, you've got everything. And now you've got things you pulled out, but it's in a structured way that we can then do something with. So I find like when I'm trying to work with clients who are trying to build AI, they'll like to think in terms of like how code works, where they'll think of the steps and what are the logical steps of how you go and what do you need to
Yeah.
build. But a lot of the time, I want to go, how do you as a human just do that thing already? Let's just do it together. Show me the mistakes you make, how you correct those mistakes. When you read something, where do you look? Do you start from the top left and read down? Do you start in the middle? And every single thing that you think of when you think about how you as a human would solve that problem, I think you'll regularly find there's an analogous concept in our AI toolset of a thing that you should then try and do. Um, yeah. So I think, yeah,
So let's dig into that AI tool set a little bit, right? And you said earlier on that Drupal AI kind of adds a I don't know if you'd call it like a normalizing layer or like something that just kind of like levels the playing field, right? For integrations. I'm wondering like how does Drupal AI make integrating with various AIs easier?
well, one thing is we've taken a lot of inspiration from Search API, and obviously part of our the tool set, the AI search is requires it. I think it's fantastic, and the way it works just makes a lot of sense. Um, and one of the things we tend to do is we make it so the providers who know the model have the ability to flag what that model can do, and then the rest of our model can make decisions based around that. So you can install search API, and maybe some things can do faceted search very well and others can't. But you can build it, and it will do that. It was just without it, it might do it slower or something. So similarly, you might have an AI model that can handle images, and so what we'll do is we would build the whole thing so that the provider can tell AI module we can handle images. I can see images, and if you build a something on top of it that requires images, you can then make sure your module checks, does this module allow for images? And there's only a very specific set of tags that have been carefully created by us. Although, people can add it, but they would add it into the abstraction layer so they can check, which means they can then decide to do better error handling. If the end user decides to swap out the model to something that can't handle them, then it would warn you. And so that's something I think is really important about it, is that it's not just that you can swap them out, but we have designed it from the ground up to think about what are the likely problems you're going to encounter if you just swap things out all the time. And then what can we make sure module developers are doing further up the stream to make those things happen seamlessly. A major thing that happens a lot is some of the smaller models can't handle outputting JSON. And if you want to do anything that's automated with AI, rather than just give users a poem, but you want to do something where AI is telling you, yes, this is good or bad, you usually need it to do something like YAML or JSON that is a human readable for the next stage. And what we found in the early stages that we could get AI to make good decisions based around the data we gave it, but the JSON it spat out was rubbish. Didn't Rubbish is something that people aren't going to understand. Bad. So I forget that. Yeah, I'm British and I need to be careful about the word.
That's all right. Rubbish is one of those things that translates.
Okay. Yeah, and what we found is that that's a flag that we put in, which is, do we think it can handle JSON? And it's going to require the provider to make a judgment call, because it's not just yes or no, but the people that provide modules can think you probably shouldn't do. You can, but if you did this, you're going to have errors all over the place. So don't do that. So that's one way that we make things a lot easier. Yeah.
I think framing it in the way, like in the way of like search API, right, is like makes a lot of sense, at least to me, because I've used search API, right? And so you're basically providing that, I don't know, lack of a better word, like that normalization layer where you're saying like, hey, you can have any backend you want. You can have a combination of backends, but like the front end interface is going to be pretty similar for you, where we're going to take your request and we're going to send it to, to these backends for processing. So like that makes a lot of sense to me. And I mean, that sounds super easy, because as somebody who installed and played with the OpenAI module, like that was only one service, right? One thing, right? And there's all sorts of stuff popping up out there. So having to install a module for each one seems very very cumbersome, right? To a site builder. So this makes a lot of sense, and I'm excited to see that there's some standardization, if you will, as to how Drupal can interact with some of these services.
Mm.
Well, to be clear, I think that's the plan for the Drupal AI module, and a lot of the people that maintained a lot of the other AI related modules are helping out with this project. But it's not like the community, I think it will coalesce around it, especially since, like I said, the maintainer, like one of the things that Jamie and his team have done really well, I think, is reaching out to the other maintainers and including them. But the community as a whole hasn't like stopped using like the Drupal OpenAI module yet. Like those still exist. So I think everybody's going to eventually start moving stuff over, but I just don't want to speak to it as if that's already happened.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's ready. It's ready for evaluation. It's ready for people to start using it. Absolutely.
it's like any new thing,
But
right? Like
it's still new. Yeah.
there's like, there are going to be the modules where you're like, oh hey, you have to go install this module, but like hopefully eventually, as we move forward, people will kind of move their module into a sub module, add-on module, and build out that ecosystem that you were talking
Yeah.
about earlier, Nick.
Yep.
I think a big thing is that it's currently in alpha state
Yeah.
compared to OpenAI. So that's we're hoping to get a beta out either during or after Barcelona next week. Um, and I think that will be a big thing that will then make it so that, okay, now's the time to move. The AI module itself, the core of it, is actually pretty stable. Like if we were just the AI module, we could probably have released a beta a while back. It hasn't changed that much. The underlying, like the API changes we've been making are things like that JSON flag. But had built your whole module on top of it, the JSON flag wouldn't have been necessary. It was only becomes necessary when you start doing very advanced stuff and needed it.
I have a
Um,
I have an off-topic question.
hmm.
Martin, in Canada, how do they say beta?
I would say beta as well.
Ah, okay. All right. I was just trying to figure out if that was like an American thing or not. Thanks.
Oh yeah, it's beta. Yeah. It was so difficult asking for water in the US. Those are people who just didn't understand what I was asking for.
Really?
Water? Yeah,
Water?
that's
Wa
what you're saying.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
you have
mean,
to imagine the T is a D, water.
wait. I mean, I don't know. I didn't think that was that hard to understand, but I guess it depends what part of the country you're in, maybe.
Yeah, I had times when I asked someone, "Can I have a glass of water, please?" And they were just like, "What? I don't know what you mean."
Sorry, what? You're like H2O. Oh, got it.
Oh.
Surely context would help as well. Like this is why LLMs are good. Like a glass of. There's not that many things I could be asking for. It's got a W at the beginning. Anyway, but
Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I went off far afield there.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that will be a big thing that would change it. So the AI module itself is pretty stable, and we started marking off the submodules as experimental because that's in a much larger state of flux. There's a couple of we just need time. It's there's a lot going on. There's a couple of little features I think we want to add to to automators, and then that will be very stable. And that hasn't changed much, but I think there's a couple of core features to make it really work well. Um,
yeah.
and then with AI search, we've been really pushing AI search a lot. The way that there's this tool called Llama Index that I think is where all the cool people are at the moment in the AI search world. And there's another tool called LangChain. And the way that we did RAG with Search API AI, and that most people are used to, is known now as naive RAG. It's sort of like the simple way of doing it. It promised you could just stick all your information in it, and AI would be able to read everything and learn everything, and you wouldn't have to think about it anymore. And that promise never materialized. There's these more advanced approaches to RAG. We call it like advanced RAG, modular RAG, agentic RAG. There's all these like terms that we have, and we're starting to build them into the AI search module. And we're finding the
Oh,
answers
okay.
it gives are so much cooler, but it does mean that the framework we're building around we're calling it assistance API and the search module, it's in a much bigger state of flux. The user interface I'm not happy with at the moment at all. I really need that. I think that needs a big rework. Um, we need a lot more effective error handling. So there's a lot of things that we have to do there to make it a lot more stable.
Yeah.
But we call it experimental because I really do believe, like the old naive RAG, in the real world, it very rarely was actually useful to anyone. I think this newer stuff. Um, one of Michael has been working on some pretty complicated. He's the one who really opened my eyes to this new way of doing RAG. He's been working some pretty complicated stuff to do with helping engineers out in some very very engineering heavy industry tech world, and he thinks he's got this like AI tool that will take a customer email and give an answer that requires a human to read textbooks before they can do it. Even an expert will have to go through and read textbooks before they give an answer. And he thinks he's getting it to like 75% accuracy. He thinks humans are about 85% accurate for this stuff anyway. And I've seen it, and it's so cool. You ask a question, it takes a good 6 or 7 minutes to give an answer. So there's a lot of things to do. Optimization needs to go there. So we're hoping to bring that in, but that's experimental. But the core of it, I think we're ready for beta probably next week, and I think that'll really help. And then OpenAI will get deprecated. Search API AI will get deprecated. So I've seen some people using it at the moment, and those are going to get closed off, and it's probably not going to be any support forever. I don't think. Well, Kevin's with us on the AI module, so he doesn't really want to carry on with the OpenAI module. And I think that will really push everyone who is built on top of that.
Jamie, for listeners who aren't familiar with the term RAG, can you quickly define that for us?
Yeah. So uh, um, AI, when you ask it a question, it has a context window. So there's only a certain amount of information you can give it. Otherwise, it just gets confused or it won't work. So if you have a large amount of data, I don't know, you've got a textbook and you want to ask a question about the data in that textbook, and it's not in its own training, it's a textbook you've written. We need to find some way of taking the important, relevant information in that book, without giving it the whole book, to the LLM to look through and give you your answer, especially if you've got lots of books. And so RAG, which is known as retrieval augmented generation, is a method where we are able to take your question and do something called semantic search. So it searches for like paragraphs, we call it chunks, but paragraphs of text that seem to talk about the same thing your question talks about. So it is using AI, it's using something called vector search and embeddings, but it's not got any reasoning capabilities. It doesn't understand what it's written. It doesn't have any memory. It can't look at that text and know that it's a paragraph from a book. It's very, very dumb. All it's doing is our traditional search was taking the characters you've written and trying to find those similar characters in the text. Whereas this is a little bit clever. It can do it based around meaning. So we built this little in the early days. We built a little demo where we had some products in a store and there was some T-shirts, and we asked it, find me the ethical products. And there was a product that had the word, we we've created this in an ethical manner, and that was found. We had another one which was, we pay our workers a fair wage, and the semantic search was able to find that because it knew that fair wage usually is what people mean by ethical. But also, what was interesting is we had one product which is that we pay people as little as possible, and you could ask the LLM, I am a Victorian business person who has an ethical system of ruthless efficiency with no regard to human life. Find me what I would believe is the most ethical product. And it would find you the cheapest one. So it had some concepts where it could understand what you mean by the word ethical a little bit more than just searching for that word. Uh, but that's this thing called RAG, or semantic search. It's just all it's doing is it's same as normal traditional search, really, but it's doing it based around the meaning of the phrase, um, um, and not just the actual text. And what we have found is with LLMs, there's a whole bunch of tools that would have been okay on its own, but when you combine it with an LLM, it becomes magical, like the unstructured IO that you've used. Um, so what we have found is that combine those things together, you can suddenly get it to do a lot of things. Because actually, we don't really want to give LLMs too much information; it gets confused. So even if you could give it the whole textbook, it's better to condense it. Similarly, when
Yeah.
you think as a human, when you read something, having to have the whole of Drupal's documentation in your head at the same time to think about something is not. You want to condense it down. You want to find which pages are relevant. You want to find the bit of text, and so RAG is one of the tools for doing that.
Okay.
especially for versions. Triple
So
7, 8, or 9, 8, 9, and 10, 10, 11. I don't know. Now I'm
Yeah.
confused.
So
Ooh.
so how much has the Drupal AI module changed from the other implementations, but also like AI Interpolator? I think a lot of the ba- base came from AI Interpolator. Has there been a significant change in the namespace change too, or
Sorry, what do you mean by just the namespace change?
a big part of the early transfer was moving most of what AI Interpolator did into the AI module? Did you also like upgrade the underpinnings, change functionality? Like what's different between AI and Interpolator other than the fact that Interpolator is no longer supported?
So interpolator and automators are almost like for like. So the fact that we have the abstraction layer underneath it does help us. So it's a lot easier to swap between models. We've got this default model that you can pick, and if you change the default model, it will change it across all the settings. Um, we've moved it so that the settings of automators are on their own entity, which means in theory, a single field could have multiple automators on it, and then you could pick between them. Obviously, Martin's worked a lot with the Augmenter module, and there's a similar space of the ECA module, Augmenter, and Interpolator that were doing similar things, and we've tried to bring them together. So Augmenter is a much better experience for having like a concept that you just apply to content types. So you might have an Augmenter that is, I don't know, good at changing tone, for example. I don't know if that exact one, but that would just take something and always change tone, and you could just add it to a content type. Whereas with automators, you have to set up everything every single time you want to do it manually. You can't just turn it on.
Yeah.
So we built something like we built a alt text module, an alt text generator module that will take any image field, and then when you edit the image or add it next to the alt text field, you can click generate with AI, and it would just generate it. And the
S-
dream would be to do that with automators, because then you could click a button and change the prompt to tune it to your website. Similarly with Seek Editor, the dream is that when you're changing the tone or translating, we do it with automators, you can change it. We haven't got there yet. We got plans, we've got the underlying framework, but it's not there. So
that
automators is mostly the same at the moment.
yeah, that's actually one of my questions. I've been having this discussion with the client that's using this actually, because the initial pathway we did is very tightly coupled to entities. So we set up a workflow where we upload the file to an entity, then when it gets saved, it processes the automation. And we're looking to integrate some of the stuff more tightly into the, and we've set those as separate entities so that they're not the ones that the users editing, so that they don't see all these weights and times and all that stuff. But one of the things that we want to do is make it more tightly coupled so that the user can trigger these. The problem is
Yeah.
when you're dealing with large PDF, large 5 megabyte PDF, you know, between the multiple calls, it can take 10, 15 seconds for that to process, which
Yeah.
is a long time. Is there so are there plans to have something so that you can almost like a queue,
Yeah.
but not really have it tied to cron where you have like we almost want it to be in a queue, but a queue that if it's not busy, we can execute immediately, but with Ajax, so we don't
Mm.
have to we don't have to wait for the request to finish. Are you working on that type of integration, or is that really just something custom?
So there are plans for it. I think one of the things we're struggling with is, and I think a lot of people find that in the Drupal community, is when you build modules that are fully open source, is how do you monetize it? Um, because if we do a really good job, then the Drupal agencies won't need to come to us. If our documentation is amazing, if it's easy to use, then we can make less money. So one of the things that has been our main focus on is how do we do the thing that gets the people who are building it money the quickest while still open sourcing everything and dealing with the balance of when we're doing client work, the AI module stagnates and this AI world is changing so much. So we're trying to figure this stuff out. So a
Yeah,
lot of the time we're going where people who want to pay us seem to want to go. And so recently there's been a lot of interest in AI search. And so that's where a lot of our energy's gone. And there's been a lot of
makes
interest
sense.
with agents. And so the way I define the difference between automators and agents is automators are really set in stone things. They're like a little thing you make, and they'll take this one field, let's say it's the body text of something, and then they will summarize it. Or they'll take one field and then they'll take a taxonomy on that thing and then use that information to change the tone in some way. And they'll just do that one thing every single time. Whereas agents have like skills that they can do, and you can ask it a range of questions. So we have a taxonomy agent, and that taxonomy agent, you can get it to um, look at something and then add the taxonomy. You can get it to make new vocabularies. You can get it to make new terms, delete terms. It can do all these things on your Drupal site. And so it becomes much more flexible where you could get a taxonomy agent that maybe on cron just goes through all of your content and then just starts categorizing them every so often, if you wanted to, because you've set the thing in stone. It can take in a whole variety of inputs and
Yeah,
figure out for itself what it's going to do. These agents tend to have agents inside them, so they'll look at a problem, divide it into subtasks, and give it to other agents to handle those things. Whereas automators, it can still do steps, but you have to physically make the step
yeah,
to look at that image and convert it into this. Like with automators, if somebody decides to upload, they've got an input and it's maybe an image, maybe a CSV file, maybe it's a prompt, maybe it's a web scrape, maybe it's a voice thing. You would have to use automators set up to handle all of those things. But with an agent, you could just say, "Here's a bunch of stuff. Go and I don't know, create a view from it," and it would just figure out how it does that and choose
okay.
what it wants to do. Um, and so I'm really excited by automators. I really want to build those things, but it's all a case of waiting for the time that it's like,
Yeah,
is this week the time to do that thing? Oh no, because this thing with agents is more important. Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. I want to be clear that even the set in stone ones that you're mentioning are incredibly flexible because, like, even our example, we upload the file, it sends it to unstructured, generates markdown, then we send that on. There are some instances we've already tested this. Like sometimes you don't have a file to start with. Sometimes you already have semi-structured data. If you put that into the markdown field, the automator picks up at that starting point and goes through the rest of the chain. So you don't even the more set in stone, so to say, workflows are flexible enough that you can actually start the workflow anywhere in the chain if it's multiple fields. You just have to edit
yeah,
the field. Whatever field you change, depending on your settings, it will do the next levels automatically.
yeah. I agree. I actually believe that automators. There's a couple of things we need to do. I think we need automators to have some level of logic, some way of choosing whether or not use one or the other. which prompt you're going to use, and we're going to need to be able to, so you click a button and fire it off and reuse them. But I think for real AI projects that are going to make someone a lot of money in terms of like savings, do something powerful, I actually think Automators is the coolest thing that we've got at the moment.
Yep.
It's just not as easy to sell yet. I think if you've sold it, an automated project is more likely to deliver value to a client than a lot of the things in the AI module. Like the CK editor plugin is by far the easiest to sell. People will love it. I'm not certain it provides that much value to a lot of people, although we've made some changes now where like uh, before when you you had like a CK editor assistant and you could click on uh, um, how you want to change the tone of this content, and it would be things like happy, sad, angry. But we're using taxonomy for that. So because we're using taxonomy, you can go into the taxonomy and type in the description more information about what do you mean by sad.
Oh,
And so
okay.
now it's really cool because you could do things like take some content and say, change the tone to our corporate guidelines. And somebody could just type whatever they want, but it would then change the tone to corporate guidelines, where in the description of taxonomy, you've written essentially like a pre-prompt about that.
Yeah.
Maybe when you're translating, instead of just translating to a language, you could put into the description, this is our brand guidelines of how we talk in Sweden. We don't like to talk, it's not, don't just translate the language word for word. You need you to change the tone in this particular way of how we sell ourselves. So even that's getting cooler. But I think Automators is the really cool place that if you have an automated project, you're more likely to deliver tremendous value to a client. It takes a little bit more for
Yep.
them to see that.
So in the Drupal community, we have this thing that we're all working on, or it seems like we're all working on it, right? Called Drupal CMS, codename
Yeah.
Starshot, right? And I'm wondering how Drupal AI might impact that or might be included in that, or like, are we even really thinking about Drupal AI with Drupal CMS?
Yeah, so we're thinking about a lot. Obviously, this is going to go out after Dries has announced it all. But at the DrupalCon, he's going to show off a really cool demo of how we're going to use AI. What we've decided is the place we're going to target is to help AI not in the content authoring experience, like the CK editor stuff, but actually in the config editing. Because Drupal CMS's main goal is to help end users and maybe non-coders get set up with Drupal. And what I think is Drupal is actually very easy to edit, but it's very daunting when you have a blank slate to know what to do. Um, so, Martin's worked a lot on an event recipe, and still, if you don't know anything about Drupal, learning how to change a field, manage fields, where that is a bit scary. So what we've done is we've created like an AI assistant chatbot that has knowledge of how to implement things in Drupal. So if you have this thing, you can go and install the event recipe, but you don't like the title. So you just ask the chatbot and it changes it. I want to add an image field. So I go, can you add an image, add images to this? And it will just add it. It's at the bottom of the page and you don't like that. So it's like, can you just move it up, please? And it will do that thing. And if it doesn't know, if you ask it a question that's too vague, it can then reply to you with questions. And then you'll go, sometimes we in our prompts, we've said, can you change the event to wine tours, for example? But it didn't know, are you talking about an event content type, a specific event taxonomy? So it would just ask you, you tell it more details, and then it would then go and do that thing. Um, it could also create views, and I
Oh
just think
my
it's
God.
super cool having like this little chat bot create a whole view for you by just asking it. Um, but the thing that's really cool about it is a lot of people get worried that it's going to get everything wrong. But if you're setting up a site for the first time, it doesn't matter if it gets it wrong because Drupal has a UI for all of this to change it, to fix it. Um, we don't need 100% accuracy. We just need it to be helping you get there. It's not in the starshot demo, but we had one demo where it couldn't do something, it would then tell you, I don't have the permission to do this thing. We made it so it would never delete anything. The deleting is a bit scary. So when you ask it to delete something, it would try to say it can't, but it says, but I can help you. And then in this case, it does it from its own knowledge of Drupal because it's trained on Drupal. So then it would help you go to structure, go to content types, find this. Um, but because it's AI, when you're asking it to delete a taxonomy term, instead of giving you a generic thing about how to delete taxonomy, it can say, okay, click structure taxonomy. Now go to the vocabulary called, I don't know, feelings. Go to feelings and you want to delete sad, find sad and then delete it. So it gives you your help using the language of the thing that is on your site, because it knows your site, it knows the taxonomy structure.
Does
And
it
yeah, that's the big thing.
stay active and present between page loads? So if you are actually going through the steps as it's telling you, will it do it, or is it coming up in a new window? Like, what does that look like?
So we're going to need funding, I think, really, to push this stuff. So we've made it, and we are going to be releasing it. So it's going to be AI underscore agents. So if you went today, you'd see it. We actually have released some of the agents code now, and Acquia have helped fund a lot of this, which has been really fantastic. But if you go today, well, no, the day that we're recording, the module looks awful. It doesn't say anything. And then after Dries' notes, we're going to update the copy on that module. But that will be a module you can download and try out these things. So you can try out. We've got some agents are in it, like taxonomy, fields, content types.
Mhm.
I think views might be there, web forms. So we've got this demo that the main way I've excited a lot of people is you get a demo where you get a drawing of a web form, and it's really rough. Like it has choice 1, 2, 3 for dietary requirements. It has little stars next to things, and then you upload it to this agent, and it creates a whole web form for you. And it's a real web form, so you can edit it, you can move things around, you can ask AI to do those things. So that will be there by the time that this recording goes out. So AI underscore agents. But we have taken shortcuts to make the demo look good. So right now, the session handling is very, very rudimentary. In fact, when we recorded the AI starshot demo, the first version of it, every single time you hit enter, it wouldn't update the page until you click refresh. And when you click refresh, it would delete everything in the chat. And we had to like fake everything by like having an OBS window with another chat window somewhere else so that we could refresh the page and then it looked like the message history. There's a lot of problems with message history to do with like GDPR as well. Like, do we want to store everything you ever say? If we store everything you ever say, how do we flush the history? Who gets to share it? There's a lot of problems that we're going to have to solve there. So it is something that we've got plans for, and we've built the assistance API with the structure, so you can choose the session management method, but the others that you can pick between are all to dos. You just mention, you'll click on it and it'll be like to do, to do, to do. So it's there in theory, but we have to build it. And we really need to see, like, one of the reasons why I think it's good to focus on money is it's so easy as an open source person to just build things you think are cool. But if somebody's not willing to pay for it, it's probably not that cool. So do I know that people want to create views of natural language? Well, until people start paying me to do it, I don't know. I feel like it would be good, but I don't know how many people out there.
I feel like you're probably onto something there, because every time I go into creative view, I'm kind of like, oh man, I wish there were an easier way to do this. So
No,
especially if your view has filters and relationships and all sorts of other stuff. So
Yeah, if you could build an AI model that would like set up contextual filters, like I would pay money for that hands
oh
down.
my
So,
God, yes, 100%. So one programming note for our listeners: if you're listening to this right now and you haven't watched the Dries note from DrupalCon Barcelona, it is Barcelona, right? Yes. Okay. Just pause here, go do that, and then come on back.
I'm intrigued because we've had some scrutiny in the AI module. Some people have responded very negatively to it. Obviously, a lot of people don't like AI. Full stop. Very angry by it. So I'm very tentative when people ask me, "Are we planning to have AI in Starshot?" Well, yeah, in terms of we've shown the demo of it. It's there. It's certainly in a demo site that Martin set up. But my guess is, as soon as this thing is released at Barcelona, we're going to get a lot more opinions about it, how it's structured, how we making it work. And so my expectation is between now and DrupalCon Singapore, there's going to be a flurry of activity. More of, especially the core developers will get involved, and then we'll have a clearer picture of exactly what is good in
So
Starshot versus not.
two things there. If you're dissatisfied with the demo from DrupalCon, you can send your messages to Martin. The other thing is, hey guys, it's Drupal. If you don't want AI, just shut off the modules. Boom, gone.
Yeah.
All set. No
And
problem.
I also want to point out really quickly too that to Jamie, you had mentioned that there's some massaging to get the demo to work. That's completely normal in these types of things. I was just reading
Yeah.
an article yesterday or the day before talking about how Steve Jobs had 5 or 6 iPhones during the initial iPhone demo because
Yeah.
they couldn't make phone calls, they couldn't connect, they couldn't do anything. So he was just like using sleight of hand to switch them out. So it's not that it's faking, it's just it hasn't been polished yet. So the demo shows what the end state will hopefully be.
But the cool thing is, unlike that demo, although we've massaged stuff, we've also released a lot of what's going on
Yeah.
there. So the only thing we're not releasing is the content migration agent, because we want funding for that. But also, content migration, I think we're going to need to do very differently to how we've done it now. But everything else that you're going to see in that demo is now going to be on Drupal.org. So although we've massaged a demo, you'll be able to download it, get it set up on your website, and then try and break
And
it.
use it.
I found the taxonomy one super useful. I was building like a prototype for someone. I was sat in a bar with somebody I was trying to sell to, and he wanted to make something to do with AI, and we started doing the structure in Excel, and then we had all these taxonomy terms, and it just took such a long time to click add field, entity reference field, link it to the taxonomy, go to vocab, create the vocab, add all the terms, bring it in, and I could just copy and paste the list from Excel, and it would just make it. I wonder if that's something like actually a normal Drupal developer might find nice, to just have it just make these things. But
Anybody that's created taxonomy can say copy and pasting a list would be very nice. Like, here, create all these terms. Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Well, and one of the steps that folks will hopefully by now have seen in the Driesno demo is even putting in a single query that gets the AI agent to create the taxonomy reference, create the vocabulary, and automatically go out to the internet and get the values to create the terms itself, which, like, to me was pretty mind-blowing that could be done, because I think we had talked about it in a meeting like a week prior, and then a week later that capability was there and fully fleshed out. So
Or just be, in that same scenario, like, hey, give me a list of days of the week, give me a list of
yeah.
countries, give me a list of US states, like all of those things where you're like, hey, I need a list of things and they're standard and don't really change all that often. Like, please build that.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
in the demo, we didn't include it in the end, but one thing that we did do in the one of the drafts was in the demo that you will have seen if you go and watch that. We have wine tours, and we want to do it based around wine regions, and we say, can you create a taxonomy just for this? But one of the demos we made was you go, I want to categorize this somehow. I've been doing wine tours for a long time. I've got loads and loads of them, but I've never had a structured site before. I've been using something like WordPress instead of Drupal, so I've never really had tagging. Can you just give me a couple of ways of tagging it, and then a couple of categories and the things in the category, and then it would give you a list of them and like the top 5, and then you could go, oh yeah, I like those 3, make those, and then it would just do those ones for you. Uh, and the other thing with the content migration that I think is really powerful that we didn't get to show is that because of the structured unstructured thing, if you have, like, let's say a 5-star module, so you've got a whole bunch of reviews, but you've been maintaining this blog for a long time, so your reviews have been like you've been typing in the words 4 out of 5 stars into the body field of a blog post. Sometimes you go, I love this, and you just say how much you like it, and then you come along and you really want a list of all the best books you've reviewed filtered, and you come along, you add the 5-star field, but you try and do a migration, and you actually have to manually look through that thing and type into a migrate script or an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. Yeah, that should be 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
With AI, you can do a migration where it just looks through all that content, looks at the structure on your site, which it knows, and then just guesses. Yeah, that looks like you would have given it 4 out of 5 stars. You wrote 4 out of 5 there. You wrote 8 out of 10, but this field is now 4 out of 5 because that's when you standardize. So we're going to cut it in half and do 4 out of 5. Super cool for migration.
Oh my God.
Super cool, especially not for migration, but moving people to why Drupal is cool, because they've already got the unstructured data. Drupal's cool when it is structured, and now we can move them to that structured thing just magically, almost.
Yeah.
I mean, you had me at
That's
Drupal is cool, but that's all right.
So, Jamie, looking out into the future, what sort of future capabilities are most exciting to you in terms of where you think AI and Drupal are going to go?
So I think there's 2 things. So one of them is I really think Dries has tried to make Starshot target like medium-sized businesses and marketing people, but I reckon Drupal could start going after the Squarespaces and the Wix people, because what we're seeing is there's a couple of things I want to start working on. So experience builders coming out. We've got AI controlling everything. But what if AI could work with Experience Builder, where you just found a design, an image of a design, a Figma file, something, a Photoshop image that you liked, or a website that you already own, and you just pointed AI at it and said, "Make me this." And then magically, I had a Drupal site with a theme created, layouts, paragraphs. It's got content types. It's given dummy content. I think that would be so powerful for even non-developer end users. I really struggle with, the worst thing about Drupal has been the theme uh, ecosystem, because there's just no. I mean, Commerce Start Kickstart was the main thing I used to use at one point. That was like the best. You could just download it and it'll make your site look reasonable. There's millions of framework stuff, but everything you would do, however much end of clicky draggy stuff it is good for a non-developer to do, it would just look so ugly until you hired a developer to make it look good. So if we can make Drupal
Yeah.
actually look good. And then the other thing is that one of the ideas we had with the wine tours was adding reviews onto it. I looked at reviews and it's like, that's not the content type. That's a little bit more complicated because we got events. We need to create a new entity called a review, which is attached to an event. We need a UI so that when I'm looking at an event, you can click a button and type in a review. We probably need a moderation layer. We need some fields like 5-star. So we thought, like, could we use AI to add reviews to the existing starshot thing? And we started working on a RAG system that looks through all the Drupal modules that exist on the Drupal site. And it's getting pretty good at telling you those things. And there's already a review module. But when you got in a review module and you install it, you have to find the configuration page, which is a nightmare for Drupal modules, like where this particular module has decided the configuration is supposed to go. Then you have to set it up on the content types that you want. You have to decide if you want moderation or not. And then it will appear eventually. But we've now got recipes which store config. So what we were thinking of, could we make AI take your question, go and find the modules for it, look at the configuration that that module needs to get up and running because the documentation on the module is good enough that it knows now, then set up a recipe and then allow you to install it. And I can just click a button and it will then work on all the contents that I want. Recipes don't have a wizard, but maybe the AI thing could be the wizard where it goes, "Oh yeah, you want this review. I've noticed you've got 2 types of events on your site. Which one do you want it on?" And it'll ask these questions and build it for you. And so that's one thing I'm really excited about, which is I think Drupal could be super, super amazing for non-developers, like it was always supposed to, like site builders, but to another level. Yeah.
I absolutely freaking love that idea because for the longest time I know enough code to be dangerous, but I'm very much in the camp of like a non code site builder and trying to make things as user friendly and as easy as possible. So that point of view and those ideas are super appealing to me, and I think that that sounds lovely. So we should all work very hard towards that.
And just one more thing to add quickly was like, so
Go
that's
for it.
how it impacts Drupal itself. But I actually think this is bigger. So what Nick's been doing with Automators Interpolator, I think is actually very, very special. There's a lot of people are around this tool I called LangChain and Llama Index, and there's these tools that people are using, and what they're finding is AI out of the box is okay, but when you use these tools to chain prompts with services and make them go back and forth to data in your system, to making decisions, to checking it, you can do really powerful things. But the problem with these tools is, one, they're heavy on code. You really have to know what you're doing. And two, the normalization problem. So we have all standardized on how to do dates in the Drupal community, how to do addresses. There's one address field. This is the way to do addresses. There's no other ways. So if you come along and you ask one service or LLM to do something where it gives you an address or a name, it will have to store it in the address field, which means every single step on your chain will be able to handle it in this consistent manner. And what I've found is that even for hardcore developer tools for building AI stuff, I actually think Drupal is going to become the best in class of anything that exists. I'm looking at everything else in the open source world, and it's too code heavy. I'm looking at things in the proprietary world, and they've got some cool clicky draggy UIs, but it is proprietary, so you lose a lot of the freedom that you have, and it only works with its own tools. And so I think Drupal is going to be able to just explode at building proper AI applications. And one final thing about that is that they would talk about everyone's scared of AI making decisions and not having a human in the loop. And so if you build something with Llama Index, you have to trust your programmer to. They're going to write everything that is done in code, which will be in, you won't be able to understand it. So you have to trust your programmer to build UIs to help you check what it's done. But they have to put effort into it. Drupal is the other way around. The best way to automate things in Drupal is you build the system to handle everything manually. We have field UI, we have experience builder. So everything can be done with a human, but then AI automates it, which now means humans can check it much more easily. They can see what it's doing. They can conceptually see what it's doing. They can edit it. They can stop it. They can review it. And I think that means that from a multiple of levels, I can imagine many, many future AI applications, Drupal will be the go-to for making it better than
Yeah,
anything else that exists
I
right now.
I can even see, I mean, I'm getting pretty inspired right now for the future of Drupal, but I can even see a long-term situation where you have some sort of, because we have config management too, you
Yeah,
can have some sort of like staging area where if a client's trying to interact with the site or make a change, they can use the AI to like configure some stuff and then present that environment to you and be like, this is what I'm looking for. And then you can look at the config or even have an AI that looks at the config and like explains these are all the changes that are made, and you can figure out what needs to stay, what needs to go. Like, hey, for some reason the AI decided to create a third taxonomy vocabulary. We already have a tagging category. It should be this. You can modify it before releasing it or roll it
yeah,
back if you need to. But you can start, instead of like having to have one of the things I always struggle with is having translating their requirements to the technical, right? That's part of our jobs. But if they can interact with an LLM or a chatbot, they can help them kind of see some of the consequences of their decisions or build it out, and you can have something to look at like a prototype. Even if that's not what eventually gets pushed to production, you have a better starting point for having that discussion. You're not like editing forms while you're doing it, they're interacting with it. That, I mean, even that could be powerful. Or
Well, I
like you
mean,
said, if you're demoing it.
you can close the loop on that, right? Where it's like, hey, the client goes in and talks to Drupal, right? And Drupal does what it's asking, and then it says, hey, Drupal, like, hey, send this to my developer. It can create as long as it knows, it can go create a pull request, and you could pull that down and like start working with that and go, oh, this is what they mean. Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, let's integrate this. Like,
Yeah.
let's take this code and bring it in.
Uh,
Like, it
it
makes sense, right?
Yeah, even bringing it into the review. I mean, one of the hardest parts about working with multiple developers is the config changes, right?
mhm,
It, especially if you installing new modules and changing stuff, like reviewing config changes is very tedious. It can be very easy to miss something. It can, like, there's some aspect of loading the site up and checking to see what they did, but having some way to like even just give a summary of these are all the config changes that are in this pull request, I feel like would solve a lot of problems too. But
yeah,
So, I mean, I think the thought here is that the future is bright with Drupal and AI. And yeah, Jamie, I think your point of view and your insight and your future stargazing is very insightful and very uh, just great. Like, it's very inspiring. I think is to use a phrase Nick just used. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back at some point to talk about kind of the next phase of Drupal and AI.
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how people respond to everything that we're showing at Barcelona because, yeah, gonna be a wave, I think.
yeah, I'm excited too. This is our first embargoed episode where we have to be careful about when we we release it. Um, but for our listeners, if you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/td promo.
You can get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest host, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button in the sidebar. All right. If folks wanted to get a hold of you, Jamie, and talk about AI or talk about the future or anything, how should they best do that?
Yeah, so hash AI on Drupal.org Slack is we're all there. So that's the easiest place. LinkedIn, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, less so on Twitter, but LinkedIn I'm active. And then freelygive.io is our website. Um, Oh, and then I suppose, yeah, the AI module is that /project/AI. So the issue queues, as Nick said, Marcus is very. If you post something, you'll get a reply, and maybe it will be fixed. Um,
Awesome.
He's very quick.
um,
Although I don't want to promise work for him. Like I, I'm always hesitant to be like, hey, yeah, they'll do all this extra work. So do your due diligence, contribute back yourself as well. But both of you have gone above and beyond and been very helpful as I've been implementing this. So I appreciate that.
It's open source, man. Martin, where can folks find you?
Folks can find me as Manclue on all of the Drupal and social channels, and they can read my blog at manclue.com.
And Nick, what about you?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixman, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. See you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.